Hello again, everyone. This week we're moving into what is arguably, at least in my opinion, the most important chapter of the semester here, where we are starting on into Chapter 7. And I say Chapter 7 is the most important because it uses a lot of the stuff from Chapters 1 through 4, provides context for the things from Chapters 5 and 6, and sets up things we'll do in Chapters 8 and 9. Really, everything starts to come together here at this point. We're going to start with section 7.1, and we're not actually going to do very much math in here. We're just going to get introduced to the idea of what we're doing with a thing called a hypothesis test. And we're going to talk about how we set these things up with things like our hypotheses and what it means when we talk about errors, as well as a thing called the level of significance, and then how we can decide what the results of our test actually mean. So again, very, very little math goes on in here, but this is a vitally important section to understand from a vitally important chapter. I won't go so far as to say that you can't do the rest of this stuff if you don't get Chapter 7 really well, if you don't get 7.1 in particular really well, but knowing how this stuff operates, knowing what we're trying to do, is going to give a lot more context for what's actually going on, and it's going to make the rest of the material here a lot less of a mindless slog and number chase. Because I don't want this stuff to be mindless. This really should, if not make sense, at least clearly have value. So there's more in terms of like what went into the videos than normally what I would do for this, especially in 7.1. Take your time, go through this carefully, try your best to make sure that you really understand what's going on. If you need to, go back to these things as you're working. It's really, really important stuff to have the basics down for. And then in 7.2 and 7.3, we're actually performing some tests, where in 7.2, we are looking at what's called the z-test, where we are testing information about the mean, and we assume we know sigma. So this operates very much like the things we did at the beginning of Chapter 6, except the assumptions are a little bit more fair, so I don't quite skip it over, where we're going to talk about what the z-test is, and then look at how we can perform it in terms of things called p-values and critical values. And then in 7.3, we're going to look at an even more reasonable test. We're going to be testing the mean without sigma. So we don't know anything about sigma. That means we're going to be doing stuff in terms of t. We get the t-test, where the t-test has basically the same procedure up to a couple of addenda as the z-test, and then some adjustments for the fact that you use the t-distribution instead of the z-distribution. But like we saw, t is very similar to z, so the interactions are, for hopefully clear reasons, pretty similar. And then with this week, we have a worksheet, so we get some time in there practicing with this stuff. And next week, we are actually finishing up our third unit. Went right by, even though it's our longest one. So we have deadlines for Chapters 5 through 7 in my lab, finishing up there next week, along with a pre-assessment to start getting you guys prepared for that exam. So, big week this week. Expect to hear more from me about that exam as well soon. Take your time in here. Shouldn't be too much of a rush. Should be at the very least some relatively entertaining things in those videos. Hope you enjoy them. Hope you get the most you can out of this stuff, because it is really important, especially for people who are going to do stuff that actually involves statistical testing. But anyway, I'm taking up too much time introducing this stuff. Let's get in there and start working with it.